Hey, good morning. Happy to be here with you, and our topic this morning is on heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. And as I was reviewing different things last night, I saw all kinds of other interesting things, but I don't have time to present them. I have one talk called I Care, Do You Care? We're talking about your eyes, but I've got many, many things. So let's get started. Let me pray first. Heavenly Father, thank you for a beautiful day. And I ask for the presence and the power of your Holy Spirit, that all those who hear and listen and watch will receive a blessing. And because of what they have heard, they will live more healthfully. They will have a closer walk in relationship with you. And that we will use our sphere of influence to win souls for you. May we be your faithful children and friends for eternity is my prayer in Jesus' name. May his will be done. Amen. So the first section is going to be about heart disease, cholesterol, and now the bad news. It's never too late to change. As long as you're breathing and alive and can think, you can change. Okay? If you're breathing and you can't think, well, then maybe you can't change. But anyhow, all of you who are here today and listen to this can change. So don't say, it's too late, I'm too old. No, it's never too late. Never too late to eat right, but I've been eating like this all my life. Yeah, and that's why you're the way you are. You need to change and get better. It's never too late to exercise. I've been exercising at 11 o'clock at night, midnight, going for my walk. So, reminder and refresher, new start, nutrition, and E, exercise, W, water, S is sunlight, T is temperance. Temperance, no tobacco, no alcohol, and we strongly discourage the use of anything containing caffeine. Okay? A is air, R is rest, T is trust in God. The better you know him, the more you will trust him. So, to go back to nutrition, I want this indelibly imprinted into your mind. A healthy, low-fat, low-refined sugar, whole foods, plant-based. Okay. That's kind of where we start. So then, this is the 28 words. Eat healthy, low-fat, low-refined sugar. If you have diabetes, I say no refined sugar. Okay? Whole foods, plant-based at regular times with nothing between meals in sufficient quantity to attain, that's to get to, and maintain your ideal weight. So, heart disease, are you at risk? Well, the only people who are at risk for heart disease are those who have hearts. If you don't have a heart, you're not at risk. But I guess everyone here in this room and those who are listening, you all have a heart, so you're at risk. So you better learn how to take care of it, okay? Fair enough? Now, typically, this is what your dietitians and doctors would say. This is what you should have for a healthy heart, chicken and fish. Well, is that true? Well, chicken and fish have cholesterol. They've got, unhealthy fats, so that's not true. And, I guess there's some cottage cheese up there, and, cottage cheese can be made with non-fat milk, but I would encourage you to avoid dairy products as well. The standard American diet is SAD, SAD. Standard American A, diet D, okay? And as you see in this picture, what he's eating there is, he's too short, he's overweight, he's got all kinds of fat and sugar and all kinds of other unhealthful things there that I don't think you should eat. So, if the effects of fatty food on your circulation, see how fast the blood moves normally? That's the way it should. But what happens when you have a fatty meal? Now take a look. See how fast it is now? It slows down. It's sludging. It's really slow. That's from one high-fat meal, just one, okay? And how long does it take before it starts to speed up? 9 to 12 hours. Whoa. So, you know, you go out and you have, you know, your pepperoni pizza or whatever, or, you know, or something, you know, or your fried chicken, Big Macs, French fries, hot dogs, hamburgers, you know, no pork, you know, we can use beef bacon, and you have all of that stuff. You see how bad what happens to your circulation. Dramatically slows down. And that's why when people have significant heart disease, they go out to celebrate. And sometimes when they celebrate, depending on what they ate, and whether or not they actually do other things, they don't survive the night. They have a heart attack or a stroke, and that's because the blood flow slows down so much. 9 to 12 hours before it begins to speed up. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next one. Okay, so here we see in this picture, there's an artery, and all that yellow stuff there is cholesterol plaque. That's what you don't want to have. And that's why I do the ultrasound exams. I'm looking for that in your carotid arteries, okay? So, you know, there's the plaque, and we can have all kinds of medical procedures where we can open that up and get things through. But heart disease is the most common cause of death here in the United States and in the industrialized world, okay? So a healthy artery, you see how that blood can go through there very nicely and easily, and you need the blood to get through to your brain and other parts of the body because the blood carries oxygen, okay? And also the blood carries the waste products back, you know, carbon dioxide and other things back to the lungs where we get rid of it. And if you eat the standard American diet, you see how that artery is narrowed? There's plaque there, and you see how much it's been narrowed, or we say stenosed. We say that's probably like an 80% narrowing, so 80 to 85% narrowing, so not so much blood can get through. And what happens then here, we have the formation of a blood clot. So if you've got lots of plaque, you've got a high blood sugar, which makes blood thicker, and you don't drink enough water, you know, you're dehydrated, you can get a blood clot. And if that's in an artery that goes up to the brain, it's a stroke. If it's in one of the arteries of the heart, you have a heart attack. And that's not too good, okay? That's not the way you want to live. So you see the artery on the left, it's nice, clear, and open. The artery on the right, the lumen, the opening, is much smaller. It's been narrowed by all this, by all the plaque. This is plaque here. And that's why the opening is only there. Here is much wider. So here's what we see when we look at a cross-section of a plaque, okay? Here you have the endothelium, that's the one cell thick lining here. And then you have the muscle cells here. And then you've got all this deposits of cholesterol down here. Now, what makes ulcers? You know, like smoking and doing things like that can make that. And when you get this ulceration here, then it makes it easier for the cholesterol to be deposited. You want to keep this one cell thick lining nice and intact and keep it whole. Okay. Now here is, you know, with technology now, they've got really great things that they can do now that they couldn't do 40 years ago. This is called a stent. So the doctor puts something in down here, and he runs this up, and he gets to the narrow place in the artery, and he puts that thing in there, and then he expands it, so that makes the opening bigger, okay? And then he pulls it out, and this stays in place. And that's to help keep the artery open. And so the blood goes through there. But if the person doesn't change the way they live and they eat, what's going to happen to that? It's going to get plugged up again. Now, it's much better, rather than having the procedure, if you will follow the suggestions that we follow in New Start, whole foods, plant-based, exercise, water, sunshine, temperance, air, rest, and trust in God, you can reverse that normally without having to have all that hardware, that stuff inside your arteries, okay? And that's been demonstrated time and time again with before and after angiograms. Our good old President Abraham Lincoln says, "You cannot help men permanently by doing for them what they could and should do for themselves." In other words, they should change their lifestyle. If you've got narrower arteries going up to your brain or your heart, you've got cholesterol plaque, you want to get rid of it, then live an appropriate lifestyle. Whole plant foods, eaten whole, okay? So you need to change. Don't depend on technology to keep you going. Step number 1 in managing heart disease and not getting it and or reversing it is reduce the saturated fat in the diet. Now, where does saturated fat come from? Primarily, it's from animal foods, meat. Meat has saturated fat, eggs, saturated fat. So anything that comes from an animal, you don't want to eat. Is that clear? Cheese, saturated fat. Yolks in eggs. Now, if you eat the egg white, there's no cholesterol there. But, there's a problem with eggs. You've heard of bird flu and other things like that. And if you do eat eggs, I encourage you not to, but if you're going to, cook them well done. Before I knew any better, I used to like my eggs. If I'd fry the eggs, I like them sunny side up with the yolk nice and soft and runny. There's no way I would ever do that now. Number one, I wouldn't eat an egg, but if I had to, it would have to be cooked well done. So like hard boiled, something like that. Prefer not fried because I want to avoid the oil and the grease there, okay? So saturated fat is found primarily in animal foods, raises cholesterol. You have mono and polyunsaturated fats, which help to lower the cholesterol. But you don't want saturated fat, okay? Step number 2, reduce the cholesterol in your diet. So avoid all animal foods, especially red meat, beef, pork, mutton, even fish, chicken, turkey, eggs, shellfish, lard, all of those things. You just don't want to eat them. Cheese and butter. I know in the Hispanic group of people, they like cheese. And if you have your food without cheese, you say, well, it doesn't taste the same. Well, instead of cheese, there's something called nutritional yeast, which you can use, and it's got somewhat of a cheesy flavor, okay? But there's no cholesterol in it, nutritional yeast. So cholesterol is only found in animal foods. Fruits, vegetables, grains, and nuts contain absolutely no cholesterol. So you can eat things like over here, fine, but you want to avoid all the stuff on the left side of the picture. Now, this is amounts of cholesterol in different types of foods. In Asian society, I was told that in the little children, they like to give them brains as soon as they start. Why? Because they want them to be smart. So they think that if they eat brains, that they're going to be smarter. Well, you see, brains, this is for a 100-gram portion. It's really high in cholesterol. And these are the amounts of cholesterol in 3.5 ounces or 100 grams of these different types of foods. So, I just avoid those, okay? You don't want to use those at all. Okay, but please note, fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables, how much cholesterol is there? 0. Even whole milk has some cholesterol. Non-fat milk has a small amount, but whipping cream, beef, fish, so the ones in green, fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables are acceptable. The others you want to avoid. Okay. Okay. Any questions? I'll take any questions about cholesterol and heart disease? Yes.
Even after avoiding all those cholesterol foods, and you still
You got to speak louder.
What do you want to say?
Yeah.
how can
Well, or
how
someone
how can
do it for her.
Can you help her?
What do you need?
But it said after avoiding all those cholesterol foods, and you still have high cholesterol.
She's avoiding a lot of cholesterol, but she still have cholesterol.
She's what?
She's avoiding cholesterol, but she still have cholesterol.
Well,
How could
yeah,
that be?
you're going to have cholesterol even on a total vegan diet. You'll have cholesterol, but I want to know what the number of the cholesterol is, and if it's high, you may need to exercise. You may need to lose weight, do some other things. Okay. One more question, and then I'm going to go on. We're going to talk about cancer.
Yes, I want to know, is it true? I heard another naturopathic, well-known person in the Adventist world that mentioned that there are higher incidences of Alzheimer's disease for people that have low cholesterol. Like, it's okay to be in the 200s. Typically, we say a non-plant-based diet, what is it? It's under 200 or something like that. But there's been research, have you heard about that, that people have their cholesterol levels maybe in the 200s, that they have a lower incidence of Alzheimer's disease?
Pastor, repeat what she said. This is not clear.
That there is a study in which people with cholesterol over 200 had less chances to have Alzheimer's disease.
Well, she said that people with a cholesterol above 200 have less chance of Alzheimer's.
Yeah, have you heard about it?
No, that's not true.
Oh,
Oh, less than 200. Yeah, well, look, my ideal for cholesterol number you should have for your total cholesterol is 150 or less. Okay? And if your LDL cholesterol, low density lipoprotein cholesterol, I like to see that at 70 or less.
If you're on a plant-based diet anyway, whole food diet.
Well, yeah, but there'll be a few people even on a whole food plant-based diet, they still may be higher. But you've got to look at the whole lifestyle. Do they exercise? What are they eating? Even as plant-based, French fries and potato chips are plant-based.
That's eating correctly. Yeah.
You're right. Okay, that it's a conflict in information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, you've got to be sure of the sources of your information, that they're reliable. Now, if Dr. John Schaffenberg said it, okay, but I definitely don't believe everything I read and hear and see on the internet. So there's so much misinformation out there. That's one of the reasons why I got a master's of public health and nutrition, so I can separate the fact from the fiction. And if I had any problems, people would ask me a question like that, just to give it more credence, I would refer to one of my instructors or teachers or professors, but I knew the answer, but they're going to pay more attention if it comes from one of my professors in the School of Public Health and Nutrition.
Would you take one more?
Okay.
You mentioned that 150 is an ideal ideal cholesterol number is less than 150. Are there stages at which a more aggressive intervention would be necessary to get down to that number?
Well, you know, my aggressive intervention is, like I said, whole food, plant-based diet. That's as aggressive as I'm going to get. I'm not going to promote pills. I'm going to promote exercise, weight management, and all of those other things. But, you know, I'll look at the individual case and talk to the person about it, okay? Okay, let's go on. And talk about cancer. Okay, good news and bad news. Okay, what is this big cell here? Is that a macaroon or a marshmallow? And are these marshmallows? No. Okay. This is a cancer cell. That's the bad guy. All these out here, these whatever they look like, you know, those are killer cells, natural killer cells. And their job is to kill and destroy the cancer cells. So you want to live so that you have more natural killer cells, and you want them to be active. So what are things that you're going to have to do to have more natural killer cells? One is exercise. Okay? We'll talk about that as we go. Okay? So if everything known about cancer were applied, up to 2/3 of cancers would not occur. So that would be really good. Okay? Now, cancer is a large group of about 150 diseases characterized by uncontrolled growth of the cell. Normally, a cell will only grow to a certain size, the way God has created and designed us. Normal cell grows to a certain size, and that's it. But a cancer cell is an outlaw cell or rogue cell. Okay? Uncontrolled growth. Grows bigger than it should, and it goes to places where it doesn't belong. Okay? And by the time the cancer is discovered, 80 to 90% of the life cycle of that cancer is already passed. Because the cancer starts as one cell. One cell becomes 2 cells. 2 cells become 4, and it grows slowly, fortunately, most of the time. Most cancers are fairly slow growing. So 1/3 of the world's 10 million cancer cases could be prevented, and another third could be cured through early detection and treatment. And on the handouts that you were given the other day, there are certain things that were specified, cancer tests that you need, tests you need to get for screening you for cancer, like pap smears, mammograms, prostate exams, colonoscopies and things, and those are all in the handout that you were given, okay? So we can prevent 1/3, another third can be cured, and the other third, unfortunately, they're going to pass on, okay? For the remaining 1/3 of the cases that can't be cured or treated, at least we can keep the patients comfortable by controlling their pain. So, that's something that can be done. The pain can be controlled, okay? Most common cancers in the world: lung and stomach cancer for males, women, females, breast and cervical cancer. So ladies, unless you've had a hysterectomy, please get pap smears and get mammograms, for the possibility of breast cancer, especially if you have a mother, grandmother, sister who had breast cancer. So these are important exams. And both males and females need to get colonoscopies, or the possibility for colon cancer, okay? Primary causes of cancer, all of which are preventable, are tobacco, don't smoke, food, high-fat animal foods, obesity, and lack of exercise. Now, what are the facts? More or less in the world, at least 10 million people die of cancer every year. 19.3 million new cases, 2.3 million breast cancers, 2.24 million lung cancers, 1.97, almost 2 million colorectal cancers, 1.44 million prostate, and 1.1 million stomach cancers. Those are approximate numbers for the world as far as deaths go, okay? Now, in the U.S., almost 610,000 people die from cancer every year in the U.S. 18.1% of deaths from in the U.S. are from cancer. And let's see, there will be almost 1.9 million new cases of cancer this year. And cigarettes, the most common cause of preventable cancer. So I'm really happy now that when I fly, that you can't smoke in airplanes. When I first started traveling by plane many years ago, they had smoking was allowed in planes, and then for a while, then they had a no smoking section, so a few rows here, but all the rest of the plane could smoke. Of course, what good does that do? Because it goes all through the plane, and finally, no more smoking. So I'm so happy that they don't allow smoking in planes, and they don't allow smoking even in airports, and that's really good, and so that's exciting. So avoid tobacco and avoid smoking, and you also want to avoid secondhand smoke. And you don't want to go to places where they allow smoking. Now, unfortunately, in some casinos and other places, they allow smoking where the people are gambling and doing things like that. But what are you doing there anyway? So I do go to casinos because sometimes I've had to stay in a casino when I'm lecturing to people, or I have to walk through the casino to get to my room. But I don't go put money in the slot machine and stuff like that. So although, let's see, sometimes they'll even give you a dollar, a few coins. Yeah. So that I'll probably put in the machine, and then I go. But I have no desire. I'm not expecting to get rich, and I don't buy lottery tickets and things like that. I put my money and I give it to the church. I donate it to Amazing Facts or to my church. I pay my tithe and offerings and things like that. So now, this is estimates for cancer deaths. That was 2023. So I can probably now, they would have that for 2025, so I can update that. But look at here on the left side, those are the new cases of cancer for these different kinds. Then the deaths, 5-year survival, that is, if a person with this cancer is diagnosed now, in 5 years, how many will still be alive? And then on the right side, the risk factors, okay? So you will notice lung cancer, the biggest risk factor is smoking. 5 years, only 22% will survive, and they'll get like 238,000 new cases for 23. But look at how many deaths, okay? And then look at colorectal. That's the next as far as number of deaths. Then breast cancer, pancreatic cancer deaths, prostate cancer, leukemia, liver, lymphomas, okay? And when you look at the risk factors, HFD, that doesn't stand for the Hollywood Fire Department. That stands for a high-fat diet, okay? High-fat diet is associated with colorectal cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer. FHX, family history, radiation, tobacco, and so on, okay? So those are the estimates. Now, food and cancer. Tomato and tomato products may help women ward off cancer and heart disease. The fruit contains lycopene, beta-carotene, and antioxidant to tocopherols like vitamin E, phytosteroids, and the carotenoids. So tomatoes are good for you, okay? They also have phytoene, phytofluene, and all of these are defenses against breast, ovarian, endometrial cancers and help cut the risk of heart disease and high blood pressure. So whole plant foods, okay? The American Cancer Society says that you really want to keep your weight down. If you're overweight, you increase your risk for cancer. Cancer risk in flab is as bad as the risk in tobacco. 1/3 of cancer deaths are related to diet and inactivity. So the word I use for inactivity is if you're not exercising, you're being slothful. You don't want to be a sloth. You know what a sloth is? It's an animal that hangs in the trees and it moves very slowly. So 186,000 lives a year could be saved if people change their living habits, okay? Lifestyle, plant-based diet, exercise, avoiding tobacco, alcohol, okay? Excess weight contributes to cancers of the breast, uterus, colon, rectum, kidney, gallbladder, esophagus, cervix, ovary, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, multiple myeloma, pancreas, liver, prostate, and stomach cancer in men. Okay? Losing weight could prevent 1 of every 6 cancer deaths in the U.S., so that would save 90,000 lives a year, see? Because of approximately 540,000 deaths. So again, keep your weight down, exercise, move. Use it or lose it. You've got to move and be active, okay? Researchers followed 900,000 people for 16 years. They concluded that excess weight, being overweight, accounted for 14% of all cancer deaths in men and 20% of those in women. Probably because women are more fat than men. Well, usually that's the case, but I mean, it's appalling. I mean, I see on the plane or where I travel, wherever, people, they're just huge. You know, 25, 30 years ago, people weren't so fat, but I mean, they're immense. You know, they don't walk, they waddle. I mean, it's sad. I feel bad for them, you know, and I say, you know, if you're interested, willing to follow the suggestions that I have, you know, we've got to talk how to lose weight forever. You know, some people lose hundreds of pounds, but they keep finding it. We want you to lose it, not find it, see? And we'll talk about keys to success later on. Heart disease is America's leading killer. Cancer is the disease feared by most mortals. So, I mean, I can ask the question, would you rather die of cancer or would you rather die of heart disease? Which would you pick? Most people pick heart disease because they think there's less pain and suffering. We equate dying from cancer with pain and suffering. And usually there is. It's physical pain and suffering as well as emotional. And I mean, there's also pain and suffering with heart disease. But in our way of thinking and the way you've looked at people and friends, you know, see, well, if I want to die, I want to have a heart attack or stroke, and I want that to be it. You lived to 95 and you just die like that. So, but that's not always the way it happens. You got to recognize that. Okay. Bad news in all age group cancer cases are increasing, and that's what we're seeing. Continues to go up. Alcohol. Esophageal cancers, mouth cancers, voice box, larynx cancers, and liver cancers related to alcohol. Okay? Increased risk for colorectal cancer, breast cancer, and 11% of all cancer deaths or up to 60,000 deaths a year are related to alcohol. How about coffee and cancer? Non-coffee users versus those who had 2 cups. Let's go here back here. Non-coffee users, those who had 2 cups of coffee a day for men had a higher risk of bladder cancer, okay? Now, let's look at caffeine is a co-carcinogen. So it's going to increase your risk for cancers. It's linked to cancers of the kidney, breast, colon, pancreas, and ovary. So that's another reason why we say in New Start and Temperance, we've discouraged the use of foods and beverages containing caffeine. No green tea, black tea, you know. You can have your herbal teas, chrysanthemum and things like that, peppermint, mint, and stuff like that. I don't like any of those things. I want water. I don't want herbal teas even, okay? If you want to, that's fine. But, you know, the herbal teas, some of them may taste good. I have no idea. I haven't really tasted any. Okay. Cancer in America. 1 out of every 4 deaths in the U.S. is currently from cancer. Here's the risk of developing cancer. Men, 45% of men will get some type of cancer. Okay, 39% of women will get some type of cancer. But the risk of dying from cancer, men 23% and women 20%. You know, the most common cancers are probably skin cancers. So that's something you need to be aware of. If you've got a lesion on your skin that's getting bigger or that bleeds and so on and is elevated, so on, you better check with a skin specialist, a dermatologist, and make sure there isn't some type of cancer. You know, there's birthmarks and things, and they've been like that for years. But if you've got a pigmented lesion and it's getting bigger, it's elevated, you know, get it checked out. And then what we like to do is we call it an excision biopsy. We just cut the whole thing out and then send it to the pathologist and get them to check and look to see if it was a squamous cell cancer or basal cell cancer. So basal cell cancers are quite common, especially in areas where if you've been exposed to the sun or get sunburn. That's another reason you don't want to go where they don't have so much anymore, the tanning salons. You know, where they had places you go there and so you have a nice tan. Well, you know, you've got sunshine now and tanning salons have fallen out of favor. So bad news, 1 person dies from cancer about every minute, okay? 35% of cancer deaths are related to food, 30% related to tobacco. Healthy lifestyle can lower your risk for cancer 30 to 40%, and daily exercise, again, lowers your risk for colon, breast, prostate, and uterine cancers. Now, this shows how a cancer grows. You know, you have an outlaw cell, 1 cell becomes 2, 2 become 4, and so on it grows. But for the cancer to grow, it requires a blood supply. See these blood vessels there? They've got to supply the cancer with nutrition. If you could find something and prevent those new blood vessels from forming, that would starve the cancer cell. You know, we call the growth of new blood vessels angiogenesis. Angio refers to the blood vessel growing. So if you could get something that would prevent those blood vessels from growing, then that could kill that cancer cell. But angiogenesis is important in some of the parts of our body to keep our body repaired and to keep things going. Not all angiogenesis is bad, but the angiogenesis for the cancer yeah, if you can do that, that would be wonderful, okay? Now, how do cancers spread? They spread through the lymphatic system, lymph vessels, through the blood vessels. So that's why a cancer can start in one part of the body. You know, like it can start in the breast or in the colon. It can go to the lung, the bone, brain. So they spread through the lymphatic system and or the bloodstream. And we use the term, when a cancer spread, it metastasizes. So these cells go where they don't belong, where they are not found normally. And you see that depicted in the picture. Now, this is a growth in the colon called a polyp. Now, if you have a polyp in the colon, you want to have it removed. And that's why you need to get something like we say colonoscopy. Now, when it first gets started, there's no cancer. But here in these pictures, if the red means that it's becoming cancerous, you see, it's just starting to get a little pink here and then more, and then finally the whole polyp is cancerous. And then what happens if that hasn't removed? The cancer cells goes through the wall of the intestine. They get into the bloodstream or the lymphatic system. It spreads to other parts of the body. So this is what will happen, can happen if you have a polyp, okay? Not all polyps will do this, but if you have any polyp, the standard of care is to remove the polyp. And you're not going to know if you have a polyp unless you have an examination of the colon called a colonoscopy, okay? No. Okay? Yeah, well, you're fortunate. But the best way to clear it is to remove it. Okay? Now, a diet high in animal fat causes the following cancers: breast, colon, pancreatic, ovarian, and prostate cancer. Higher risk for those cancers if you eat a non-vegetarian, if you eat the standard American diet. Okay? And this reminds me to tell you about my father's history. I mentioned this yesterday, I think, but I'll mention it again because we're talking about cancer. Father's family, 5 girls, 11 boys, 6 cases of cancer. Girls, females, breast cancer and ovarian cancer. Ladies died from it. The guys, 4 colorectal cancers. 2 of them died from it. Another one had it removed, but he died from a heart attack. I mean, in other words, if he hadn't died from the heart attack, he probably would have died from the cancer later on. My father, because of that family history, was told to get examined. He had a test called the sigmoidoscopy. Because back in the 60s, they didn't have an instrument called the colonoscopy where they could see the whole colon. They could just see the lower part. Found the polyp. The polyp was removed. It was probably like this. There was cancer in part of it. That was removed, and he lived another 18 or 19 years. When he died, he died from, he had polycystic kidney, so he had kidney failure. But I don't know for sure whether he had any colon cancer because an autopsy was not done. I was overseas in the mission field, and if I had been there, I would have wanted an autopsy to find out if he had any colon cancer in him, but it wasn't done, okay? And I mentioned that I had a brother who was 2 years younger than I am, and he died from cancer, a lymphoma, before his 28th birthday. He and I, our family, were not raised on a plant-based diet. We ate lots of meat, fish, chicken, and all of that kind of stuff. And I didn't become a vegetarian until I was in my 30s, a few years after my brother had died. And if I hadn't become a vegetarian in 1974, it's pretty unlikely I'd be here talking to you. I probably would have had some form of cancer before then, okay? So faulty genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. Cancer-causing agents, tobacco, alcohol, excess fat, meat, saturated fat, excess iron, okay? Benzopyrene, nitrosamine, methylcobalamin, malonaldehyde, and heterocyclic aromatic amines. All the ones in the right-hand column are formed when you cook meat, not when you cook vegetables, and, you know, not when you cook kale, collards, bok choy, spinach. Okay, so many of the ways of cooking meat form carcinogens. Benzopyrene is formed especially like if you charcoal broil meat, you know, charcoal broiled steaks and things like that, benzopyrene. Okay. Other things you don't want to have, PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, DDT, asbestos, wood dust, coffee. You don't want to get sunburned. You don't want to eat eggs, milk, cheese, saturated fat, viruses associated with some types of cancer, and you don't want to eat lots of sugar. Less refined sugar is best, okay? You can eat the sugar that you get in your fruits, you know, dried fruits, raisins, figs, you know, things like that. That's fine. Treatment of cancer. Best way is a healthy lifestyle. You don't want to get cancer. You want to prevent it. Surgery, if in doubt, cut it out. I'm a surgeon. I like to cut. So I only cut on the eyes and maybe the skin around the eyes. Okay. Radiation is helpful for some types of cancer. Prostate cancer, Loma Linda, they have something they have called the proton accelerator, and that works very nicely. And chemotherapy is good for certain types of cancer. Eggs. Eggs and prostate cancer. I used to like eggs. I mean, I could still like eggs, but there's no way I want to eat them because they're just not good for you, okay? So eating eggs is linked to prostate cancer according to a National Institute of Health study. By eating 2.5 eggs per week, meaning increase the risk for a deadly form of cancer by 81% compared with men who consume less than half an egg per week. That's enough reason for me right there to not eat eggs, okay? Like, you know, I told you I used to like eggs. So instead of eating eggs, now I get scrambled tofu. And that's very satisfying. Have that with some onions and mushrooms and things, and put a little turmeric in it, then you've got your yellow color. And so anyhow, you are what you eat. Choose carefully what you eat, because I don't want you to end up here like our little friend in the red suit. Standard American diet. Okay? Changing your diet will make a difference, okay? Avoiding the animal fat and proteins and going to the plant-based diet is much better. So cancer protective lifestyle, fruits, vegetables, cereal grains, and nuts. And you don't want to smoke. Smoking accounts for 1 in 7 new cases of cancer, kidney, pancreas, bladder, mouth, liver, stomach, cervical. And only 5% of patients survive more than 5 years after diagnosis of cancer. Antioxidant vegetables, which are good for you: garlic, kale, spinach, Brussels sprouts, alfalfa sprouts, broccoli, beets, red bell pepper, onions, and corn. My favorite seasonings for cooking: garlic and onions. There's also, it says they're antioxidants, so that's good. And I like green leafy vegetables. So be careful with the alfalfa sprouts. It's probably safer to cook them than to eat them raw, because depending on where they're grown, sometimes they can be contaminated because they're grown in fields and they use animal waste to fertilize the fields, so there could be E. coli. So my advice to people is don't eat raw alfalfa sprouts. If you want to eat them, cook them, okay? Safer. Cooking meat at high temperature produces heterocyclic aromatic amines, and those are carcinogens. When juices from any meat, poultry, or seafood are broken down by heat, you form these heterocyclic aromatic amines, and they are carcinogens. Okay? Meat eaters, more prostate cancer, ovarian cancer. Twice the risk for bladder cancer. Use of beef, poultry, or fish more than 3 times a week, double the risk. And greater risk of colon cancer and lymphomas. And here they were looking at people in Europe, 10 countries. They followed 500,000 people looking for colorectal cancer. And they found that if they increased their risk 49% if they ate 100 grams, that's 3.5 ounces of meat, red meat, pork, beef, veal, and lamb, increased their risk for colorectal cancer by 49%, eating that extra meat, okay? Red meat eaters, more stomach, colon, rectal, pancreatic, and prostate cancer. Also more stomach cancer, colon, rectal, pancreatic, bladder, breast, and so on. So avoid meat, please, please, stay away from meat. Now, is that fish sticking his tongue out at you? What is that? That's a cancer. Now, if the man of the market, he's bought that fish and he finds out, what's he going to do with that? What? You chop the head off, and what's he going to do with the rest of it? Eat it. He's going to sell it to you. So what I'm saying is, if you eat meat, fish, and chicken, in all likelihood, you've had meat, fish, and chicken from an animal that's had cancer. Because there's cancer in fish, cancer in chickens, cancer in cows, and so on. So the only way you can be sure of not eating something that's from an animal with cancer, don't eat animals. Okay? Fish from mildly polluted waters concentrate toxins up to more than 1 billion times than detected in the water. So again, environmental pollution, you don't want to eat fish. Yet there's hydrocarbons, mercury, dioxin, polychlorinated biphenyls, heavy metals, all kinds of things in the environment that end up in the fish. You don't want to eat them. Looking especially at mercury. There was an executive from a very big company, and he had some strange neurologic symptoms, and they couldn't figure out. He couldn't figure out what it was. He went to see the doctors, and then finally, one of the doctors asked him about his food. He says, "Well," he says, "Doc, I'm really trying to be careful. I don't eat red meat anymore, but I eat lots of sushi and fish." So they checked him for mercury levels. They found they were high. So they says, stop eating that fish, and the sushi and so on. Mercury levels came down and his symptoms disappeared. So, fish is not good. Now, I don't know. Well, yeah, if you ever go to the Asian markets, you see sometimes they've got big fish tanks in there with fish swimming in them. Have you ever gone to a market like that? Yeah. Asian markets? And so you can say, I want that one, or I want this one, or you know, and then some of the fish, they look like they're almost dead. Well, if they die, then of course then they put them out and they just sell the fish like that. But that's, you don't want to do that. And so in Asia, where I worked in Singapore, I worked at this hospital called Youngberg Hospital. And periodically, sometimes a year, there would be a horrible stench, odor, bad smell, really bad. And it would come across, and I had asked the local people there in the hospital, what's that terrible smell from? He says, oh, Doc, that's because of the pig farms out here about 3 or 4 miles away. And the pig farms, when you have pig farms, you've got the pigs produce waste, right? So what do they do with the waste? They push it off into big ponds. And then what do they have in the ponds? Fish. And the fish eat the pig waste, and then the people eat the fish. But that was from the stench. Eventually, they phased out the pig farms, and so that stench, that didn't happen all the time. But it's terrible. It was a horrible smell. The other thing is, in the raising of food animals, chickens and whatever, they often add antibiotics to the food. Why? Because the animals will grow faster, more of them live, and the antibiotics are fairly cheap, and so they make more money. And then if you eat the animal that's had the antibiotics, there can be residues of the antibiotics, and then there's more antibiotic resistance, people get sick, so it's not a good deal. Now they also have animals, chickens and so on, raised without antibiotics. Yes?
I had a friend with dairy farm, and I asked him why did they give constantly antibiotics to the animals, and he says it's because if one cow come out with TB, the government come and kill the whole herd.
Oh. Yeah, and I remember when my parents were missionaries down in Trinidad, and my father would say, I'm going to go out and see Uncle. We called him Uncle because he was Chinese, but he was a chicken farmer. And so he said, I need to go by the clinic and get some antibiotics first. He says, what are those for? Well, I give them to Uncle, and he puts them in the chicken feed, so that his chickens will grow faster and they don't die. And so that's in animal raising of food animals. That's been a common practice for many decades to add antibiotics to the food. In fact, the drug companies sell more antibiotics to the people who raise animals than they do to people. 70% of the antibiotics produced are used in animal feed, almost 25 million pounds. This is back in the 60s. And according to the FDA, antibiotics are fed to 75% of the cattle, 90% of the calves, 100% of the turkeys and chickens, 85% of the hogs, and 50% of the sheep. And now some places, they will tout these animals are raised without antibiotics. But, that is not the largest number of animals. Most of the animals, they still use antibiotics. You like charcoal broiled steaks, benzopyrene. The fat melts, it goes in, it falls down in the fire, it burns, it becomes benzopyrene, it comes back up and it's absorbed by the meat. So you don't want to eat charcoal broiled meat. Charcoal broiling 3.5 ounces, 100 grams of meat produces the same amount of benzopyrene that you would get from smoking 60 cigarettes, 3 packs, okay? Nitrites. They often add nitrites to meat because it helps to preserve and give it's a red color. And it also is something to help prevent botulism. So when you fry meat that has nitrites in it, you produce something called nitrosamine. It's also used in pork products. It prevents the botulinum toxin, which causes botulism, and it gives a red color to meat. Another thing they often do to meat is they treat it with carbon monoxide. What? You know carbon monoxide is not good. Well, carbon monoxide plus hemoglobin makes something called carboxyhemoglobin, which gives the meat a nice red color. So they give that. So when you buy meat, you don't like to buy meat that's brown. You think the red color is fresher. So they're tricking you, okay? So don't buy meat, okay? Methylcholanthrin, you fry meat, high temperature, you form this compound, carcinogen methylcholanthrin. It doesn't happen with vegetable oil. And a large quantity injected in a small animal causes cancer. A small dose sensitizes small animals to other carcinogens. So when you roast meat, you form another carcinogen, okay, called malonaldehyde. So you fry meat, charcoal broil meat, you form carcinogens. The only way I know of that you can cook meat without forming carcinogen, I guess, is boiling it like in water and soups and things like that. Skinless chicken breast, steak, pork, salmon, hamburger, heterocyclic amines, carcinogens, okay? You say, I don't have time to exercise. What does this say? What fits your busy schedule better, exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? Your choice. Exercise reduces risk of breast cancer, ovarian and endometrial cancer, and prostate cancer. Everyone exercises at least 30 minutes, 5 days a week, and controlled their weight. Number of Americans who die of cancer would decrease by 1/3. Colorectal cancer is a big problem. So we've talked about that. More vegetables, lower colon cancer risk. More whole grain also lowers the risk for colon cancer. Refined grains, increased risk. So more fiber, less colon cancer. So whole foods, plant-based. Preserved meat, bacon, cured ham, and hot dogs increase the risk of colon cancer, bowel cancer by 50%. Highest meat intake, lowest vegetable intake, 2.6 times more likely to develop colorectal cancer. Like when I was a kid, with almost every meal, we'd have some form of meat. And like I told you, we raised our 5 children, no meat at all. We did not use meat, fish, and chicken in our house for our children. Okay, colon cancer and meal frequency. So you see, if you eat 4 or more times a day, you almost double the risk of colon cancer, 1.9 times versus 1 if you eat 2 meals a day or less. My choice at the present time is I usually eat twice a day, sometimes only once a day. Now, how about soy? Soy has something called genistein. It slows down prostate cancer growth in mice, and it may be helpful in males to prevent or lower the risk for prostate cancer. Fat intake from animal sources, higher risk for ovarian cancer. And breast cancer, 77% of women with breast cancer were over age 50 at diagnosis, but we're finding out that the age for breast cancer appearing in ladies is younger and younger, and also colorectal cancer. And a first-degree relative, that's like a sister or a mother is the first-degree relative. If your mother or sister had breast cancer, you ladies are definitely at higher risk. So be sure to get your mammograms, please. Having a first-degree relative, 1, doubles risk. 2 first-degree relatives increases the risk 5 times. If you've got cancer in one breast, 3 to 4 times higher risk of getting cancer in the other breast. And there have been people, because of the family history of breast cancer like that, some ladies have had bilateral mastectomies. They didn't want to have to worry about that, even though there was no evidence of cancer. Stress increases risk of breast cancer. Those who said they had stress during the 5 years before the first exam had double the risk of developing breast cancer. Sweet foods, sugars, high glycemic index, more problems with breast cancer. Cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, carrots, lowered the risk for breast cancer. Vegetables inversely significantly strongly associated with the risk for breast cancer. In other words, more vegetables and fruits, less breast cancer, okay? So to prevent cancer, here are the cancer warning signs. If you have a cough or hoarseness in your voice that lasts more than a month, go see your doctor and get it checked out and find out why. That is not normal. Any cough that lasts more than a month. Unusual and sudden weight loss. If you're not trying to lose weight and you suddenly lose weight, you better find out why. If you find blood in the stool or on the paper, when you clean yourself, that's not normal, okay? And you have a mole which gets bigger or elevated or bleeds. Now, talking about blood on the paper when you clean yourself, I had a patient, and she told me, well, she had blood on the paper, and she said, well, my doctor told me not to worry about that. That was hemorrhoids. Well, that's not good enough. If you've got blood on the paper when you clean yourself after a bowel movement, you better find out and make sure by getting a colonoscopy. Because this lady who told me, well, it was just hemorrhoids, it wasn't. I mean, she may have had hemorrhoids, that may be true, but she also had a colon cancer, and she subsequently died from that. Any blood in the stool, blood in the urine, you've got to get checked out to make sure. When you get a routine urinalysis as part of a physical, and we find blood present in the urine, you've got to check that out. I had a patient come in, and we did the first test when they came to the New Start program. There was some blood in the urine. So 2 weeks later, we repeated the blood test. There was still blood in the urine. So I told her, you need to get this checked out. So fortunately, she did. And what they found out was that she had a cancer, in the GU system, in the kidneys or so on. So any blood, we find like that, that's not normal, okay? Change in bowel and bladder habits, if you normally have a bowel movement, every day or every couple days, and it changes, become more constipated, or you get a diarrhea, you've got to get that, any change in bowel and bladder, you've got to get an exam to check it out. Any sore that doesn't heal, unusual bleeding or discharge from any part of the body, nose, ears, throat, thickening or lump in the breast elsewhere, unusual indigestion or discomfort in swallowing, get those checked out. How do you eat? Low fat, high fiber, vitamin C rich foods. Use carotene, that's the orange yellow pigment like in pumpkin and carrots and things like that. Avoid charcoal broiled food. Avoid salt, cured and smoked foods. Eat more cabbage, family of vegetables. Avoid caffeine. Avoid irritating spices like chili and pepper. There was a study done in Mexico City, and they looked at people who ate chilies on a regular basis versus those who didn't. The ones who ate chili had more stomach cancers than those who didn't. So be careful with your chilies and your hot spices. So Ellen White, says we need to avoid things like that. Okay? Eat a variety of natural foods, fruits, whole grains, vegetables, legumes, and nuts. Don't use alcohol. If you do, don't drive, don't smoke. Less sugar, less salt, low-fat vegetarian diet is the best diet. 30 years of studies on cancer and diet. Experts summarize the following. Alcohol is bad. Obesity is bad. Lots of fruits and vegetables are good. Okay? Adventist Health Study. Fruits, vegetables, soy, and legumes lower risk for cancer. Meat, animal food, and eggs increase risk for cancer. Pretty simple. So, predisposing factors for diabetes, obesity, age, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, and not exercise. Okay, I guess we're going on to the section on diabetes. Any questions about cancer? Cancer, diet, lifestyle.
You mentioned the biopsy of the skin cancer, removing the whole thing. Is biopsy of any other organ dangerous of spreading the cancer?
Well, when you do the biopsy?
Yeah.
Well, what are you talking about? Skin biopsy or inside?
Inside.
Yeah, well, you've got to find out what it is. So you do it as carefully as you can, and there's a possibility. Yes, that's certainly possible, but you still got to do the biopsy because you've got to prove it is a cancer, it isn't a cancer. If it is a cancer, you may need to do something more extensive.
Regarding the sugars, what about brown sugar and honey?
Brown sugar is just dirty white sugar. Okay?
What about molasses?
In other words, they haven't removed all the impurities. See, so white sugar, they've gotten out some of the other stuff. Honey, the Bible says a little honey is okay, but if you have diabetes, I would discourage the use of honey. But honey is honey is in small amounts. I'm not going to say no because the Bible even talks about that, but small amounts, not big tablespoons of honey, maybe smaller amount. Okay? Any other questions?
Plant-based sugar like stevia or monk fruit that comes from the
That's
plant?
stevia. If you want to eat the stevia leaves, that's fine. But the that's processed. You're talking about the stevia, the extract. Yeah. I'm saying whole plant foods. So stevia, you're not eating the stevia leaves. You can eat all the stevia leaves you want. But that's processed if you're eating the stevia, because that's been processed. Huh? If you want to sweeten something, use date sugar. You know what date sugar is? That's just ground up dried dates. Or you can use dried fruit. Okay? Because that has the fibers and the minerals, and everything. And the only thing that's been removed is the water. And I don't want you to use the artificial sweeteners, aspartame, all of that stuff. So, okay.
Excuse me. Regarding fish, the Bible speaks of only scale fish, and a catfish doesn't have scales.
Yeah, so don't eat catfish. It's
Yeah.
unclean.
So there are other fish that don't have scales also.
Sure, sharks don't have
Yeah.
scales.
So
Asians like shark fin soup.
yeah, I know. They eat everything now. Yeah. So
If it moves, they eat it.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to eat fish, which I don't encourage you to do, it has to have fins and scales. Okay? Fins and scales. Shellfish does not have fins and scales. Shellfish may have some fins, but they don't have scales. You know, shrimp and lobsters and crabs, those are all considered unclean.
Talking about fish,
Hold it up.
talking about fish, it says that fish have contain mercury.
What?
Mercury.
Mackerel? Yeah, I wouldn't eat fish because of mercury. I mean, I wouldn't eat fish because of the cholesterol and everything. Like I said, I don't eat anything. I don't eat meat, fish, chicken, eggs, or dairy. Huh?
Even the
Or
fish
even
have
if it
a
has
scale.
a scale, but it's going to have mercury in it.
Amen.
Dioxins and polychlorinated biphenyls. The environment is so polluted you don't want to eat any fish. What do you want to eat the fish for? Let it live. You don't need it.
In my country, we have a farm. that
Well,
we
I
have our own
understand.
corn,
I
we have
understand. I'm just telling you, if you want the best, you want what's good, what's better, or best. If you want what's best, New Start, plant-based, no meat, fish, chicken, eggs, or dairy, period. You can do, look, you can do whatever you want. It's your choice, okay?
My daughter said, whatever you see ice, that's not food.
Right,
Okay.
she's right. Okay?
I'm happy that you talked about mushrooms. Some people don't eat mushrooms because they're from spores or a fungus, but I believe there are mushrooms that are also medicinal. Can you comment on that? I know some mushrooms are poisonous as well. So yeah, but we eat mushrooms.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with mushrooms, so just make sure they're not poisonous. So that's why I won't pick my own. I see them growing in my lawn and other things, but I'm sorry. The only mushrooms I'm going to eat are those that I buy in the market. Okay?
Okay.
We're going to go on and talk about diabetes.